Hi everyone. So I know that this isn't my normal type of content, nor have you probably heard my real voice before, but I wanted to talk about something today, as I've grown deeply frustrated with the changes made to Noli, and to be completely honest, it's kinda ruined the character for me. I would like to add that, yes, I do mostly play games for the story. It's the same thing for Beastform Simulator, and actually expect a video about that. Don't worry, I'm not going to be changing my content to Forsaken. This is something I wanted to talk about. But first, as a small tangent, I'd like to talk about why I haven't been uploading much. I'm mainly distracted by writing my story. There's a lot of moving parts to said story, pieces that I am constantly trying to improve and change. This takes up the majority of my time, excluding school. I'm hoping that I can try to express my talents more with video creation, as I really enjoyed making the Daisy comic. Now, if you did indeed watch, and or like it, well, I'm not going to be making a continuation of that specific continuity. I've changed Daisy's lore around a lot since I made that, and it's out of date with her spin-off, and I am writing now, named Daisy's Diaries. Anyway, sorry about all of that. Now for me rambling about Noli. So, if you play Forsaken, then you probably know who Forsaken's take on Noli is. But if you don't, then I'll explain the original lore and why I liked it so much. It is difficult to find an archive of the original lore, so I am merely going off of memory. This does mean some things could be accurate. Anywho, also, just a quick disclaimer. I'm going off of what I saw on the wiki. I do not interact with the Discord, as I don't believe forcing people to ask you questions for them to find out the lore of your game is a very good decision. I'm aware that there is possibly more lore, particularly about the Void Cult, but since it is not as elaborated on in the wiki document, I won't be mentioning it here and will instead label it as unfleshed out. Here's the lore. Noli and Seven were originally partners. They both exploited, hacked games, and were pretty good friends. Obviously, most people imagine them in a romantic relationship, which, with the pretty verse version of Noli, I guess. Though, I've personally never seen them as more than very close friends. It's alright to get that interpretation out of their characters, especially considering that it's rather undeniable that they were close. Anywho, something ended up happening with Seven pressuring Noli to get the Void Star. Additionally, it's commonly agreed that since Noli is a killer, that he held on to his exploiting ways. There's also a small hint of a Void Cult touched on in his lore that doesn't really get expanded on for some reason. I'm assuming that it was just a placeholder / foreshadowing for the current lore and the change that caused it. So, I really like this lore, to say the least. Obviously, it isn't perfect. The Void Cult was barely expanded upon, and Seven and Noli didn't really have that much in the game that would tell you that they were ex-partners. I mean, there is the kill sound where Noli mimics Cool Kid, though he is quite mean-spirited in general, so that's easy to gloss over. But all in all, the dynamic that they held was incredibly interesting for a variety of reasons. Obviously, Noli was his own character too, but his relationship and dynamic with Seven was an integral part to both characters. Noli, to me, symbolized the regret and guilt that Seven has, and this is also clear with Seven's pizza dialogue. He clearly tries to make himself as polite as possible, due to the bad person he used to be. Both over his past actions, his son's actions, and the kind of person that he used to be. After all, since Noli never changed, he is essentially a mirror for who Seven used to be, and that, to me, is what makes him so interesting. It's a way to show how some people can hold on to the past and never change themselves, and how others can redeem themselves when faced with certain situations and scenarios. He showed what kind of person Seven could be if he never made the choice to better himself after taking in Cool Kid. And despite it being a very small piece of information, the actual wiki entry is only like a couple lines, and it merely mentions that they used to be exploiting partners, there's so much that you can do with their dynamic. Maybe Noli despises Cool Kid out as he believes him to be the cause of Seven abandoning him. Maybe have Noli not like serious killers like 1X, as he is a trickster. Maybe Noli is jealous of Cool Kid as somebody was there for Cool and not for him. Either way, Noli and Seven's dynamic was a dynamic that was honestly really needed for Forsaken. Most characters don't have intricate dynamics, and if they do, they aren't really properly explored. Or just aren't released yet by like Sixer and Noob or Two Time and Azure. Which, granted, Noli and Seven's didn't really either, but the amount of inferences you can make about their relationship, and just the general uniqueness expressed in their tied backstories, sort of covers for that. They still should have gotten a last man standing, regardless of that. Well, sadly, this was changed, and I'm not exactly sure why. Yes, I know about the recent drama with the real 007, but if no changes were made to his character, then why to Noli? They did a similar thing to Chance and removed all of Eye-Trapped from the lore, which is a shame because Eye-Trapped was an incredibly complex character, much like Noli. I may talk about this a separate time. To me, it just feels like a case of fixing something that isn't broken. Noli's new lore is that, well, essentially he is an ancient being of mischief and chaos and enjoys attention. He goes through the games and enjoys killing survivors as it gets him attention. Through a vacuum, this doesn't really seem bad at all. There are lots of likable villains who are pure evil that I can think off the top of my head. Gummy Bear, for example. However, the problem arises when you realize that this lore change removed all of his previously established depth. Yes, Noli is a trickster, but he is clearly spiteful to Seven for turning on his back on him when it mattered most. He's more than just an attention-craving mischief maker, and seeing him be reduced to just that, when he clearly had so much more going on for him, just really feels like the wrong decision to me. Once again, I don't mind characters like how Noli is now. Some characters are just evil. They don't have a particular rhyme or reason for why they are so. If they had initially started with this lore, then, well, I wouldn't be making this video. But the thing is, whenever you keep something the same for months, hype up fans about a relationship, make people increasingly interested in their relationship, to where most Noli fan content is about him and Seven, changing it so abruptly just feels like a massive spit in the face to the community. And the worst part is, it's possible to have both of these backstories at the same time. So, now that I've explained my gripes with the new lore, how do I think it could be improved? Now, I'm not saying that I know better than the dev team. They own the characters. But what I am saying is that reducing a character to just their core traits isn't a good decision, regardless of who owns the character. I'm not mad that the lore isn't exactly what I want. I'm mad because they took depth out of a character who had a lot of it. So, I have a solution. A. This is just expanding on his original lore. Basically, due to Noli being a forgotten test account, he felt invisible towards Robloxians. Nobody paid attention to him. Nobody cared for him. He had been abandoned by all who used to. And that's when Seven appeared. A light at the end of the tunnel, a person to make him feel validated, even if it be for selfish gain. Seven essentially wanted to improve his hacking game. The mods were beginning to grow more strict, and he would need a partner, or failsafe, if he wanted to continue his villainous deeds. So Seven taught him how to exploit and gifted him a variation of the cool GUI. Noli finally had a way to not only take out his anger, but a way to settle his gripes with people in a violent way. Eventually, however, the attention the two conjured up began getting too risky. There were reports of people getting banned left and right, fights among the admins on strictness, and random people dying. So, wanting to get rid of Noli, Seven pressured him into obtaining the Void Star, which was a highly experimental device told to hold unspeakable power to whoever held it at the cost of their sanity and to be turned into a mindless attention-seeking puppet with only a fraction of their memories intact. Upon taking the Void Star, Noli's body was disfigured horribly and he was left in Banland permanently. After the event, Seven decided to lay low so that the mods couldn't catch him, which eventually led him to meeting Cool Kid and marked the final point of his redemption arc. Meanwhile, tensions with the admins were rising, and a group of protesting Robloxians began to grow ever more cultish as they heard the legends of the Void Star, an ancient relic created by Darkheart, the only thing that could give them a fighting chance at taking down Doomringer and the other corrupt admins. Unknowing of its proper location, they began worshipping the device like a god, believing that mere prayer would grant them enough power to violently settle their grievances with the admins. However, despite their constant pleas, no salvation ever came. Upon being forsaken, Noli now harnesses the Void Star to his will, a twisted telling of the legend he so naively believed. Corrupted to an unrecognizable degree, Noli seeks to continue his chaotic rampage, wanting nothing more than the suffering of his betrayer, Seven. This is a pretty quick lore I created. Obviously, it isn't perfect. Anyway, I created a second solution that is more so a combination between the two. This one would have Noli still being an ancient god/deity, and have Seven be a member of the Void Cult, perhaps even the leader of it with the powers of his GUI. Now, I don't really like this one that much, but it's important to consider that this is only a very small percentage of what you could do with their backstories. The Forsaken team obviously has a lot of writers. I don't have too many issues with the lore side of things besides the lack of it for certain characters, but this, well, it's just not a good decision any way you slice it. That's because it removes depth from Noli. Whether you like the new lore or not, you can't exactly argue that he is deep and compelling with the new lore he has going on. They could make him more interesting and emotionally resonant, but it isn't really seeming like that's the case now. Now, obviously, the current lore is a sort of placeholder, and supposedly will be expanded on later, but given how they've handled characters who have intricate relationships in the past, Slasher and Guest, I just can't really say that I have high hopes. And also, for whatever reason, in the new description they feel the need to clarify that he is stronger than hacking/exploiting GUI, like they clearly know what they were doing. It also makes things about him make a lot less sense. Before, his glitchy motif in both his songs and speech mannerisms could be explained through him being an exploiter. Now, he's just a glitchy ancient god. And what about his similarities to Cool Kid with his moveset? Is that just a coincidence? I'm sure these things will be fixed somehow, but it just really shows that their identity together is baked into Forsaken. Normally I have a lot of issues with characterization with the fandoms I'm involved in, but it isn't really the fandom's fault this time. I wouldn't really call it mischaracterization, as he still has his core traits. It's just that he's being watered down to just those traits, without giving him any depth. Now, once again, not every single character has to be deep and thought-provoking, but if you start with a narrative that most people in the community liked, and then abruptly change it with little to no reasoning, it's bound to be upsetting to a lot of people, myself included. Now, with all this being said, I don't particularly think that it ruins the game for me. Yes, I don't like Noli as of current, but there's still some really good character dynamics in Forsaken that are really solid. One can only hope that they can stay and won't have the Noli fate. So that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I've been working extremely hard this week on making the various parts of this script, editing, and everything else on top of what I'm already working on. So, have a good day and goodbye.